From our 22 News Broadcast Center, this is 22 News in Focus.
Good Sunday afternoon. Welcome to 22 News in Focus. I'm Tamara Sakarzik. It has been more than 3 weeks since Puerto Rico was devastated by Hurricane Maria. Both state and federal resources have been sent to the island to help with recovery efforts. Western Massachusetts has a large population of residents who are from Puerto Rico, and many of them, of course, have family and friends who are still there. There's limited electricity, and people are struggling to get basic necessities like food, clean water, and medicine. This week on 22 News in Focus, we'll be discussing the situation in Puerto Rico and what's being done to help people still on the island, as well as those coming here to Western Massachusetts. Our panel of guests today are Waleska Lugo de Jesus from the Western Mass United for Puerto Rico Coalition, Orlando Ramos, the Springfield City Council President, and Jose Claudio of the New North Citizens Council. Thanks for being here today.
Thank you.
Thank you for having us. Thank you for having us.
So I'd like to start by asking you guys about the people who you know in Puerto Rico. I'm sure you have family and friends down there. If so, what have they told you about the current situation?
If I could start, Tamara, I have to say that on September 20th, a lot of our lives changed in a day. There are a lot of families that are in despair. And on a personal level, I knew that I had two choices. One, go into that anxiety of not being able to help our family in Puerto Rico, or two, mobilize and help organize the community to try to make an impact. And so the next day after Hurricane Maria, on September 21st, was the birth of the Western Mass United for Puerto Rico Coalition. My dad is there, and I heard from him 7 days after the hurricane, which was really difficult because I knew that everyone was trying to do so much work, but we were still with that desire to listen to our family members' voices, you know, to know that they don't have sufficient water, they don't have electricity, some of the bridges were down, the roads were impacted, and so there was trees in the middle of the roads. You know, even if there was help, it wasn't getting to them soon enough. So that's my story.
My story started like, 8 days later. That's when I got my first call, but I wanted to just hear from them and hit personal because my uncle lost everything. Oh. And it was hard to communicate. And we started in that mode to that 20th to really just, we need to do something. This is our people, this is our family, this is our friends that we need to reach out and really start focusing on how can we help them. And this is how, Western Mass came about, and New North started also just moving, doing whatever we got to do to advocate and get the relief that they need in Puerto Rico.
And I also have family members in Puerto Rico. Obviously, we have a lot of distant family members in Puerto Rico, and so it wasn't until a week later that my mother finally heard from our family members to ensure us that they were alive, that they were okay. They were without power, obviously. Most of the island is without power. But also have, personally, I was in Puerto Rico about less than a month prior to the hurricane. And so, it was just that experience to be able to show my daughter the island and the beautiful parts of Puerto Rico, and then to see what the island has gone through. It's really heartbreaking and devastating.
Are any of your family members still there right now? And if so, what have they told you about the current situation and what has happened over the past few weeks since Hurricane Maria?
Yeah, it's been 23 days, and my father has 12 brothers and sisters, and I have over 50 cousins, and with the limited communication without electricity, it's really tough to connect. But the times that we have been able to, the stories that we hear is that, when they do get some help, it's one bottle of water, some grapes, and an orange. And then another story I heard just yesterday is that, there's a need to decontaminate even the canned foods that they receive, which is the only thing that they have to eat. And when they have those canned goods, my father, for example, said, well, don't worry about me because we are, putting 3 drops of Clorox into this bucket, and every time we are going to open up a can, we dunk the can in there and disinfect it, and then we open it. And I said, but if you know, if you don't die of a disease, you can still inhale something that's going to cause damage to your health. So I think people are just trying to take it day by day. I have another cousin that works in the metropolitan area, and you know, when they reported to work, they said there's no work for you because there's no electricity, and so we can't really do payroll. So you know, there's an economic impact also to what's happening in the island.
And that's a good point, because a lot of people don't realize that when we talk about the death toll following the storm, we're not just talking about the immediate death toll. You know, there are people whose lives are still at risk.
Right.
I have a friend who lost her aunt because she was hospitalized a week before the storm hit. And after the storm, obviously the hospitals lost power. They were unable to stabilize her, and she passed away. And so those are the kinds of stories that we hear. You know, people are still dying in Puerto Rico currently because of what the conditions are there.
And like today, you know, our office for Toa Baja, which is one of the cities that got hit real hard, we have a family of 7 that wants to come to the USA, and it's hard for them to even just to bring a handicap or the person within a wheelchair, in a chair, in a bed, just to bring them in. Costs like $5,000 to bring them for medical, to get a respite here, to get it done. It's a lot of need that is still, you know, happening in Puerto Rico. We talked to my father-in-law this morning, and there's still no water, no electricity, and they're only a half hour from San Juan, and they still don't have that. We have to be sending them boxes of batteries and stuff like that, because the post office just started working, and I'm just hoping that it gets there on time so they could have the resources that they need.
That's so difficult for many of us to imagine, to, you know, see an island, your home, just completely devastated. When we talk about giving supplies to Puerto Rico, the people who are there and in need right now, I know some people have asked, should we donate money? Should we donate clothes, food? What would you say is essential right now?
Yeah, if I could talk on behalf of the Western Mass United for Puerto Rico and kind of the creation of that coalition, that would not have been possible had it not been with the support of the city mayors. You know, this was, and you can probably hear in my voice, I'm not sick, I'm not contagious, I'm just, my heart is heavy and my spirit is probably speaking through my limited voice. But this coalition of over 80 members has been working tirelessly. But it was with the help of the mayor of Springfield, Mayor Sarno, the Mayor Morse from Holyoke, Mayor Sullivan from Westfield, that these 3 cities, and because of the Latino population specifically, is why this came about. You know, Holyoke with over 50% of the Latino population, and Springfield over 38%. It just made sense that these 3 communities would come together, and with the support of the mayors, then we were able to, I think there was a call to action, and the call was that this natural disaster has caused a humanitarian crisis, and there was an immediate need. So to answer the question, the immediate need was people wanted to give. And so we have a great community and a great state, and people with, you know, great hearts, and they wanted to donate waters, and they wanted to donate food, which is what we were seeing in the news and in social media, was the cry for help was water and food. Fast forward probably 3 or 4 days into the creation of the Western Mass United for Puerto Rico, we had partnered with the cities to create distribution centers. So within Holyoke, Springfield, and Westfield, there was probably 8 drop-off centers, and we were collecting everything. Then we had a visit from Congressman Neal, Senator Warren, and the support of Senator Markey's office. And you know, they suggested stop collecting donations because the infrastructure is the #1 need. Like, we can't, even if we keep receiving donations, we cannot physically transport, you know, because of the bridges, because of the streets, right, and other factors that played a role. And so we knew that we still had to cater to the desire of the community to give. And that was our first phase. Then, you know, with the mayor's help, we decided we set a date to close the centers, but then there was a need to pack and sort and tape and carry boxes.
So I'm assuming that means volunteers are still needed as well.
Yeah. So the second need was that of volunteers, and we put out a call, the Western Mass United for Puerto Rico Coalition, and over 50 people showed up at 6:30 in the morning the next day on Tapley Street with the Department of Public Works, and Holyoke actually had started the work with Hurricane Irma, collecting items, and that was our first site. And so, you know, it was just natural for us to begin with Nueva Esperanza in Holyoke when Hurricane Maria came about. So the immediate need was to collect, then it was to recruit volunteers, then it was to pack, sort, and then the fourth stage was shipping. You know, and I'll let my friends and colleagues and brothers here share kind of in that story how miracles happened every day so that we could ship the items to Puerto Rico.
Right, and we'll get back to that after we take a short break. When we come back, we'll also be talking about the issues with infrastructure, which you heard a little bit about in Puerto Rico right now. You're watching 22 News in Focus. Welcome back to 22 News in Focus. We've been talking about the hurricane recovery efforts in Puerto Rico. The infrastructure damage alone is expected to be in the hundreds of millions, and this is, of course, causing issues with transportation. We were talking about that, and just, you know, all of these supplies and donations being flooded into Puerto Rico, but the fact is it's difficult to actually get it there. So, Jose, can you start talking a little bit about that?
One of the things that we did collect everything, and like she was saying, and when the Spirit came in and put a plane together to transport it, and they, you know, everybody put it in there. They work hard, and Western Mass Puerto Rican Relief Fund really pushed for them, and Adam and the group met early at 8 o'clock in the morning with women in the vanguard and everybody else, and even and they just sent 10,000 tons of food to Puerto Rico, which I thought it was great that they're doing it so quickly.
And when we're talking about infrastructure, something that you don't automatically think about, but is a huge part of this, is electricity. And such a large portion of this island is still without power. What other types of issues is this creating? Because you can only imagine that, you know, no power. We were talking while we were on the break about that means there's no electricity in hospitals and these critical things that you need.
And one of the things that they're trying to do, they FEMA brought some generators. They try to get them to the hospitals first, but we still see the need in the small cities that is past San Juan. There are other cities, 78 cities up in Puerto Rico. So there's a lot of cities that's in need right now of generators or of electricity in order to keep the hospitals and the basic needs open in Puerto Rico.
Yeah, Tamara, I would also add that Puerto Rico was in a recession for over a decade.
Yeah.
So when we talk about infrastructure, I'm not talking about the damage caused by the hurricane. We were suffering because of the infrastructure prior to the hurricane. So there was workers that had been laid off because of the recession. So there was no upkeeping or maintenance being done to any of the, you know, electrical throughout the whole island. So it's a problem that was occurring before the hurricane, and the hurricane amplified it, because now it's not that you're going into repair. It's almost like we need to rebuild.
Right. And I know that they've started, you know, to clear the debris from the major roads in Puerto Rico, but are there any parts of the island that are just isolated where it's difficult to get items to?
That's the issue. Like my colleague said, you know, Puerto Rico infrastructure was in disrepair prior to the storm, and the storm really exposed, you know, how delicate and fragile our infrastructure was. We actually, my colleague and I, Councilor Gomez, sponsored a resolution last year to address the Puerto Rico fiscal crisis because of the condition that it was in. We had, at the time, this was May of 2016, 450,000 individuals who had fled the island to come to the mainland in search of work. And these are professional people that we're talking about, teachers and doctors, and looking for work because they couldn't find work in Puerto Rico because of the fiscal crisis that was going on. And so this has been long coming. We saw it coming from a mile away. We knew that Puerto Rico was in disrepair, and all it would take is one storm like this to actually expose how fragile it was. Parts of the island in Puerto Rico the infrastructure there is so fragile that it's comparable to that of a third world country. You know, I mean, that's how much improvement we have to make in order to bring it up to standard.
And how are we getting supplies to these isolated parts of the island, or are they just kind of stuck right now? Is there any way to get supplies there?
I think the way we see it is moving in the right direction, but there still is a lot of need. There's mountains there, there's people that live in the mountains, there were rivers that divided them, that they have to come and move by ropes to cross the river and in order to get to find out that we're there. So there was some helicopters that did drop in some areas, but there still is a need that you cannot only go once a month and leave something, or once a week and leave something and don't go back and check, and that's the real problem that there is. As you know, Massachusetts sent some police officers from Massachusetts, and we get a lot of feedback what they're doing, and they had to go and rent their own car and bring their own water and buy their own stuff to give to people. So there's a lot of need that is happening. We see soldiers in Añasco saying that we couldn't believe what's happening in Añasco because it's like it's a war zone, and it's like, you know, they treat people more in that need in other countries that American citizens that do need the help, like the Puerto Rican people need it right now.
There's also a need to access to fuel, you know, because from what I understand, there are supplies that are arriving into Puerto Rico's ports, but the truck drivers don't have access to fuel, and so that's one of the hurdles that we need to overcome.
So when we're talking about people who are still out there in Western Mass and want to find some way to help, want to donate, do you think the best thing at this point would be to continue donating the supplies that are needed, or do you think what they really need is fiscal donations?
It's fiscal donation, and we, the Western Mass Puerto Rican Fund, has opened with Freedom Credit Union, and we have an account with Freedom Credit Union that goes totally, and anybody could deposit, go to Freedom, and they all anywhere where they have them, and they definitely could donate to the cost. But at this time, it's more money that we're trying to get to figure out what's the best need for the people in Puerto Rico.
And what would that money be spent on? Because I know some people, I know that we had a viewer ask us, well, why would they need money if there's nothing to buy? But I don't, you know what I mean? Like the deeper meaning of what you can use that for to get the essential.
There's certain profit individuals, foundations in Puerto Rico that are working towards the need of Puerto Rico. And like Combo of Hope is there. So we are working with the churches to buy whatever the needs that they could give, food, water, whatever it is, but that they could multiply. If we get 5,000, they could get like $8,000 more and buy a book for better to give to the Puerto Rican people.
Yeah, and if I could add, so when the Western Mass United for Puerto Rico Coalition formed, and as I was sharing before, we were kind of going in stages, and so we were in that stage. We finished the volunteers. We partnered with Spirit Airlines to send the first 200 boxes. Then I think the pilot found us. There was a pilot from United Airlines who lives in Agawam. His name is Miguel, and he owns his own private plane. And he contacted us and said, if you have medical supplies, I'll take them. There goes another 300 boxes. So in total, you know, we sent a lot of donations that were all contributions from Western Massachusetts, and I would dare say maybe other states, because you know, we got calls from Connecticut, from New Jersey, from the Berkshires, and we didn't want to turn anyone away. And so when we became this centralized coalition, because we were so organized, but there was another way to give, to answer your question, and that was financial. So we opened up the fund in partnership with Freedom Credit Union, you know, who has been around for more than 95 years, and the community. It was a unanimous decision to choose them as our site of preference. Now we are at a phase where we can step back because all of our donations have been shipped. They are all in Puerto Rico, although frustrating, some still kind of idle, but they're there and they will get to the people. We know that we have a sense of responsibility to the community for what we have collected. Right now we have over $70,000 in the Freedom Credit Union account, and we expect that by the end of this week, if not early next week, that we will have reached 100,000. Which is more than we ever expected because it's only been 2 weeks.
Right. That's great to know that, you know, people here in Western Massachusetts are willing to help like that, and I'm sure more of them will continue helping after they watch this show. Thousands of people in Western Massachusetts have been organizing relief efforts in Puerto Rico like we've been hearing, so we'll talk about those efforts after the break. You're watching 22 News in Focus. Welcome back to 22 News in Focus. Today we're talking about the recovery efforts taking place in Puerto Rico. Many residents here in Western Massachusetts are helping provide relief to the island, while others are helping those who are coming to the U.S. While most people have family and friends here, some of them may need help with things like housing, healthcare, and job placement. So I'd like to start by asking you about the efforts in our community right now to help those people, the ones who are still in Puerto Rico and the ones who want to come back here to the U.S.
Well, I could talk a little bit more about that because today, last night, the mayor announced that New North it'd be the assessment center and the welcome center for people that are coming from Puerto Rico.
Awesome.
And that's something that, you know, our staff is ready, eager to start doing it. We are seeing families already coming in. We started talking already with landlords and everybody in the school department, and the mayor have put all the resource center that we have to guide to really help the citizens that are coming from Puerto Rico here, so we could make an easy transition for them to really come in and get the help that they need.
That's great, and knowing that there are so many people coming here from Puerto Rico, the first thing I think about is schools that, you know, there will be a lot of children coming here, especially the ones who may not speak English. Is anything being done to help them?
Yeah, the Springfield Public Schools Superintendent Warwick was immediate in his response on the day after the hurricane, when during our first meeting with the Western Mass United for Puerto Rico and Assistant Superintendent Lydia as well. And so they have created a, within the acronym is PACE, but within their parent academy, a system and also a resource center for the families that come with children that need to enroll in schools. Everything from not only, you know, some of the families lost their papers, you know, birth certificate, IDs after the hurricane. And so the Springfield Public School is working to make sure that that is not a barrier when the families come here and they need to enroll their children. And I believe the Election Commission is also working to help those families obtain IDs. I overheard Holyoke Medical Center saying if there's families that arrive that had some kind of prescription in a hospital, you know, technology nowadays, there's some kind of cloud that if it's a CVS or if it's a Walgreens, that they can download from the cloud and find out what those prescriptions are. So this has been multi-leveled. I mean, when we say collaboration, this has really been a coming together of all different agencies around the table with the coalition, our nonprofits, faith-based, private sector, community organizers, who am I missing, legislators, you know, this, I have to say, and everyone is doing a tireless work around the clock 24/7, but State Representative Carlos Gonzalez, City Councilman Adam Gomez, City Councilman Nelson Roman, you know, they have been instrumental in just making sure that all of the pieces move. So we have, you know, elected officials that are at the table and helping organize all of the efforts.
And when we talk about housing needs, are there any specific places that you have turned into housing or that will be turned into housing, or would you say a majority of people do get to stay with their friends and family who are already here?
I think what's going to happen the first 2 weeks, first month, it's going to be they're going to come in and stay with the families and friends. And that's why we're talking to all the landlords, that they give them a little time to make sure that we could help them find an apartment, trying to find them a job. We have people that come in that were barbers that are already working straight from Puerto Rico, and we put them in Studio 2000, and they're already working. And we're talking to Taco Bell and other people around that looking for jobs, or anybody around that we could get them jobs right away to help them out.
If I could add, so the Mayor Sarno has identified the New North Citizen Council as the #1 preferred site for all families arriving to Puerto Rico, and that is how the creation of the resource guide that has all of the different levels of need have been identified. And in Holyoke, Mayor Morse has identified Enlace with Betty as the # site for all of the families. And we were at a meeting Monday night, I forget what days we're living, Monday night, and Betty informed in the meeting, the executive director of Enlace, that one day she has seen 47 families in Holyoke that arrived from Puerto Rico. So, you know, there's a lot of paperwork that goes along with that, and as she expressed and Jose expressed, a lot of barriers. Again, the Western Mass United for Puerto Rico is a coalition of volunteers, so we all have full-time jobs, and this work that we're doing is out of the greatness of our heart, and because it's so personal to us because of our stories. But this work is just, it's multi-layered.
Right. And I'm sure so many people are so grateful for everything that you guys are doing. And were you going to add something?
Well, this has really been a collective effort, you know, and it makes sense that it happens here in Massachusetts. The Commonwealth of Massachusetts has the 5th highest Puerto Rican concentration out of all the 50 states. The only ones that have a higher Puerto Rican population in the country are New York, Florida, Pennsylvania, and New Jersey. And so it makes sense that we have this effort here because there's so many Puerto Rican families living in our communities, particularly in the greater Springfield area. And it has really been a collective effort between everybody, all levels of government, all levels of all different industries, like Waleska mentioned. One of the first things that we did, my colleague, Councilor Gomez, and I, is we reached out to the mayor, and we said that it would be great if we can get everybody in the same room so that we can all be on the same page. Because we know that when these Puerto Rican families come to our communities to stay with their families, whether it's temporary or long-term, they're going to have those needs. They're going to have to need to enroll their children in the schools. Seniors are going to need access to medical care, their prescriptions, et cetera, and housing needs. And so one of the things that we've been talking about is, you know, we have these rules and regulations and criteria in place where tenants are not allowed to have certain tenants are not allowed to have family members stay with them for an extended period of time. But we understand that this is a humanitarian crisis, and a lot of these families are fleeing the island as a matter of life and death. And so this is an emergency situation, and so we're asking landlords and agencies to be more flexible with those rules and regulations.
And I know that you were all saying that just the first month alone, a lot of people are coming, and most of them will fortunately be able to stay with their friends and their family. What do we see the next 6 months looking like? How many people do we see coming here to Western Massachusetts and needing some help?
If we're getting 44 and you multiply that by a couple of 6 months, you're talking a big chunk. You know, on probably thousands, 2,000. Easy coming in, and our hope is that we could get, especially the elderly and the children, we could take care of them as quickly as we can. They are the fragile of our community, and those are the people that we need to help. But just echo what they have said, especially by the mayors, Holyoke, the mayor of Springfield, their staff, Denise Jordan and Minnie. They're part of our committee, so which is awesome to have them there at the table and really able for them to pick up the ball, and the councils to really step up and do what they got to do to make this happen in such transitional way, an easy way to do it.
And it's so good to know that we do have these services here for them in Western Massachusetts, so we can do our part in helping them in this very difficult time. Some residents in Puerto Rico are leaving the island and coming to the U.S. And when we come back, we're going to talk about what's being done in Western Massachusetts to prepare further than what we just talked about. You're watching 22 News in Focus. Well, Welcome back to 22 News in Focus. We've been talking about recovery efforts in Puerto Rico following Hurricanes Irma and Maria. Our state is welcoming many of the residents who are leaving the island and coming here to the U.S., and they're also organizing a task force to help them adjust to life here. We were also talking about, while we were on break just now, the disbursement efforts in Puerto Rico to kind of get the supplies out. Do you want to further that?
Sure, thank you. So we know that there's dozens, if not hundreds, of agencies right now in Puerto Rico on the ground. And we already spoke about the challenges of the infrastructure, but 23 days into it, that can no longer really be an excuse. I think that there are sufficient agencies on the ground and in the island, and including the officers that we have from the state, that could be, accompanying the helicopters so that they could have, security while they deliver most essential items, and let's just say to hospitals. So I think that I'm hoping that we're moving into a phase that there is a better coordination of those efforts on the ground, so that I believe right now that I know that the metropolitan area and the San Juan area are the ones that are, I'll say, better lit. There's light, there's better electricity, and there's more resources. And I know that there's a desire to spread that. Puerto Rico has over 70 municipalities, which we would call here cities and towns, and that kind of includes the countrysides that are harder to get to. But I do think that there has been a call nationally, and that people have responded, states have responded. I saw recently this week that there was a call also and a request for more FEMA workers. I'm hoping that some of those are bilingual, and that maybe some of them are from Puerto Rico, because it's really important. It's not, Puerto Rico is a Commonwealth of the United States, but you can't get there and turn on your GPS and expect to find the streets, because we name them by numbers. and so there's other challenges internally, just for our own traditions and cultura, our culture, that takes some adjusting to. So if you, I don't know, and this could be happening, and if it's not, I hope it does, there could be a pairing of workers, resources with agencies, and then just get them out. I just at this point, we need to get out to the people. We need to help them get into the medical that they need immediately, and the food and the water.
And when we're talking about getting out there and getting both the volunteers and the supplies out there that we need, I'm thinking of the airports and the infrastructure. What is that like there right now, the actual airports? Where?
Well, what I'm hearing is that there's 3 airports working. You got San Juan, you got Aguadilla, and you got Ponce. So those are the 3 airports that they're trying to move that way to that things could go in. Like our friend went straight to Aguadilla to bring the supplies, especially the medical supplies. That's where he went to. So
my brother-in-law used to work at the airport in San Juan and now is in Texas, and he said that there are, I think, that each airline is allowed 2 trips per day. So there is a limit to what. To how many people can travel, but there are some, planes in the air, and there are ways that families are arriving here, and vice versa, that people are trying to get there. The challenge really becomes, and I tell this to my friends all the time, and my sisters that are so desperate to get on a plane, I said, you have to understand, as a Puerto Rican, I can speak for myself, we are very proud people. And even though we are in despair and we are in such dire need, we are natural host. And if we say that I'm going to get on a plane with my 2 sisters and my mom, and there's a party of 5 arriving to Puerto Rico, that means that I'm causing a family member in the island more of a burden, because they have to try to find gas, and every time to go to the gas station, you sit in a line for 8 hours, and then when you get to the pump, you can only pump for $20. And so that gas from Caguas, which is my family, to San Juan is spent. And so I'm asking them to go pick me up at the airport and waste their resources, and then they have to house me which is going to mean they have to feed me and they don't have food for themselves.
Right.
So, you know, there's just a lot of things that are challenges to even using the resources of the airport. And so, you know, what we hear not only from San Juan in our contacts is that what would help right now the people in Puerto Rico is financial support, which is why we established the fund, and we'll identify, you know, where that goes to. And then just, you know, try to support by sending, as the post offices continue to open up, by sending you know, donations and boxes. I was fortunate enough, I kind of felt with my hands tied because I couldn't help my father, and through the coalition, one of the members' family was going to travel the next day, and she said to me, if you come to my house before 10 o'clock at night, I'll be able to get whatever you need to your father, you know, and that is one of probably more than 3 million stories that our community can tell. And she landed at 4 o'clock, and by 6:30, I love you, Lucy, she hand delivered cash to my father, you know, and he ran to a supermarket, and he got the water and he got the food that he needed.
Essential stuff, right? And for the people who are coming here to Western Massachusetts from Puerto Rico, if they don't have family here, or maybe have friends or family who can't support them, can they take advantage of benefits like EBT and all of that? And
that's something that we definitely are talking to the right agencies, to the right, to put it together. Helen Colton from the city of Springfield, in the Springfield side, is really putting this resource together, and we definitely have everybody like SNAP and everybody involved, Social Security office, everybody involved, that when they come in, we send them to the right places to try to get the help that they need.
And that's why this 23-page resource guide is very important, because it lays out everything that they would need at the local level and at the state level. It names the different agencies and the contact information that they can contact if they need resources such as the ones that you described. And so the City of Springfield did a very good job putting this resource guide together.
Where would people be able to get something like that? Is it on the website?
Right now, they could get it on the Springfield website, and we are doing all the translation that we got to do it in our office, working on it now to translate it.
So other than transitional assistance, what else does that packet have for people who are at home watching this right now and saying, you know, I really want to get my family here to Western Massachusetts, they're struggling in Puerto Rico, but I don't know what to do once they're here?
There's places where you could get food, there's places where you could get clothes, there's places where you could get housing, there's places where you could get all the basic needs that you need to get it. It's in that resource. The school department, you name it, is there.
And I think that's why it was so important that our mayors really took the lead on creating what we're calling welcome centers, for lack of a better word, because it's centralized. And so a lot of, you know, we have to, if I could put myself in the position, and I have survived 4 hurricanes in Puerto Rico, so I was born in Puerto Rico, and my physical body is here in Springfield, and this is my community too, so this is my second home. And they're coming with this burden and this pain and this loss, and there's other things that are more emotional and psychological, and there's also partnerships within both cities, correct,
right,
that are going to help with that. But the thoughtfulness within the welcome centers and this resource guide is that they have thought of all of the different services that would be needed, and when families arrive, to your point, if you have a family member here or not, if they arrive to Holyoke or to Springfield, they go to one place, and that one place is going to help them navigate everything else.
And I think one of the questions on everyone's mind is what's next for Puerto Rico. So we'll discuss the long-term plans for rebuilding after the break. You're watching 22 News in Focus. You're watching 22 News in Focus. Today we've been talking about the impact of the hurricanes in Puerto Rico. Let's move on to the long-term recovery situation when it comes to rebuilding. What do you three think that the Puerto Rican government needs to focus on? Because of course they did have an economic crisis before the hurricanes hit.
Well, one of the things that has crippled the Puerto Rican economy that we've been talking about over the last few years is the fact the Jones Act, which the Jones Act of 1920, which puts a tax and tariffs to goods and services, goods that are coming into Puerto Rico. And so because of the Jones Act, it costs twice as much to get goods into Puerto Rico. That has resulted, because the cost is passed on to the consumer, has resulted in the fact that Puerto Rico's cost of living is 13% higher than 325 urban areas in the United States. And the average income of a person in Puerto Rico is about $18,000 a year, which is half of that of Mississippi, the poorest of the 50 states. And so that just gives you a little bit of a perspective of how the cost of living compared to what people are making in Puerto Rico as a result of the Jones Act has put the Puerto Rican economy into disrepair. The Jones Act was recently suspended for 10 days to allow access and to allow supplies to come into Puerto Rico. But long term, that has to be something that we have to talk about repealing.
Mm-hmm. So when it comes to rebuilding, you think that the laws are clearly something that we need to take a look at.
Absolutely.
What about the industries that have been completely destroyed by this?
Well, one of the things that industry that really is electricity company, and that in itself needed a lot of repairs and a lot of infrastructure work before it happened. Mm-hmm. Now, the governor just last week asked for $10 billion that Puerto Rico needs in order just to start rebuilding. And that's something that they put it to the Congress. We don't know what they're doing at this point, but that's just the specific little things that they need right now to do it. Electricity is part of it. If we can't rebuild electricity, there's no tourism. If we cannot do the infrastructure of water, there can be no tourism. They cannot fight back the way rise up the way they need to rise up. And the other things, we got companies that in Texas and other that solar panels and all this that could be so good in Puerto Rico and create jobs and be built there and do so many things that's what we need to look off the box and look what best for Puerto Rico. We got a chance now to really say, okay, what's best for Puerto Rico? Let's make it happen.
Yeah, I agree with both. I think that Puerto Rico has an opportunity to reinvent itself. Mm-hmm. We lost the sugar cane, we lost the coffee fields, and everybody here, I'm one to shop to support the island, and so if I drink coffee, it will be from Puerto Rico. Mm-hmm. But half of the coffee that people identify and think is from Puerto Rico really is not. Mm-hmm. So, there's an opportunity. There's plenty of farmers. Our weather is to our advantage, with the exception of hurricanes, of course. But, Puerto Rico is an island that has a commonwealth that has 85 degrees is the regular temperature on a normal day, which is why I'm always used to
Wouldn't that
not
be
wearing
nice in Western Massachusetts?
We wish. But I do think that there's an opportunity for, entrepreneurs and business owners to come together and to strategize around, in addition to tourism, which up to now has been the #1 source of real income for the island. I don't think there's going to be much tourist for the next year. I do think that Puerto Rico could come back. I was sharing during the break, I lived through 3 hurricanes in Puerto Rico, and the worst one being Hurricane Hugo, which was also a Category 4. And even El Yunque, which is the forest of Puerto Rico that's very famous, the trees were just literally chopped in half. And so if you can imagine that visual, and compare it to maybe when Orlando was in Puerto Rico, all of that reflourished and all of that came back. And so our greenery will regrow. What we have to do is really think about, in terms of the economy, how else can we help Puerto Rico move forward after all of this? And selfishly, we have gained a lot of resources that we didn't have last month. So how do we leverage that so that Puerto Rico can sustain itself?
I found it interesting what you were saying before about solar panels, because we obviously have a lot of that in the United States. If there were companies that could bring it there, help them build it there, do you guys think that would be beneficial?
It'd be it could create jobs. It'd be something that'd be flourishing through the island. We got great suns, and where else can you go with no passport? We are U.S. citizens, U.S. Commonwealth. You could go in freely back and forth to Puerto Rico and enjoy the places that are there. It's key to have that fun there.
So when talking about tourism, which is clearly a huge part of rebuilding because it's such a large part of the economy there, I know you were saying that you don't think we'll see too much of it over the next year. How long could it take for them to get their resorts back? And, you know, when people are booking wedding venues and vacations, how long is it going to take to realistically get these things back up and running?
To tell you the truth, I don't have an answer for that. I think that the people of Puerto Rico, the government of Puerto Rico, might have an answer. That's why he asked the Congress that, you know, we need $10 billion, whatever they could give them to start spreading the light and the water, which is the first need. I think after that, we need to do the humanitarian need first and then deal with every infrastructure that needs to be there.
What about manufacturing? I think that's also a large part of Puerto Rico,
yes.
Right?
There is, and you know, that's something that we got to work on, that they could get better manufacturing jobs like Johnson & Johnson, the pharmaceutical, everybody that could come back and really make Puerto Rico proud again.
And for the people who are at home watching right now and just heard you talking about, you know, the coffee, the different things that you can get from the farmers in Puerto Rico, I'm assuming that the money would still go to them if you purchase this stuff from Puerto Rican companies, right?
I would think so. Yeah, again, you know, when we support local economy, I always think of, you know, where is this going? Just like if I go to the supermarket here, you know, is this from a local farmer? It's the same with Puerto Rico. I think the challenge really is where City Councilman Orlando Ramos was saying with the Jones Act and how higher taxes, and that is really the reason why there isn't more coffee crops, or there isn't more or any more sugar fields and other of the natural resources that could be gained for the island.
And for most of the farmers who are there right now, would you say most of the crops, if not all of the crops, are completely destroyed?
A lot of it was gone. The only place that I saw was between two mountains. There was a nice farmer there that said, you know what, a lot of it got chopped down, but it's a little green that it will come and spice back up. That was the only thing I saw on Facebook, and it really, I appreciated that he was still doing that. He was probably like 80 years old.
Yeah. I have to say that, you know, hurricanes aren't new to Puerto Rico.
Right.
We were in hurricane season. August, September, people prepare, and they know that things could you know, that the weather will occur and that hurricanes could pass. The devastation, I feel, and this is my personal opinion, is that the response to Hurricane Maria was not immediate enough. And so when I say, you know, I've experienced different hurricanes, I know what it is to prepare water in advance. I know what it is to make a choice and say, I'm going to shower today and not tomorrow. You know, I know what it is to say, I have this bucket of water, am I going to boil it to drink it, or am I going to boil it so that I can have some rice and feed more people? So you know, in Puerto Rico, people know how to survive a hurricane season. They know
more of the efforts to get things there and pick everything up again, start over. And okay, well, we'll have the last word for you after the break. Stay with us. You're watching 22 News in Focus. You've been watching 22 News in Focus. That's our program for today. We want to thank our guests for joining us, of course, and we want to thank you at home for watching. If you missed any of today's show, you can watch it on our website at wwlp.com, and you can also find links to the organizations that are helping the recovery efforts in Puerto Rico. From all of us here at 22 News, we hope you have a wonderful Sunday.